Age 63. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Follow the leader.
Oh my God.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
And hello. You are listening Areva Martin in real time. I'm your guest host, Dr. Nicordelai Corte. Areva Martin is off today, but this is the place to be this afternoon for all of the trending headlines. And a little bit later, we have some really outstanding guests that will be talking to us and unpacking some of the biggest headlines that are trending today, being so generous with their expertise from the field. But speaking of headlines, here are these headlines. Vice President Kamala Harris today seized on comments by former White House Chief of Staff John F. Kelly that Donald Trump meets the definition of a fascist, urging voters to heed warnings from people who've worked with Trump that his beliefs are incredibly dangerous. Harris has escalated her warnings about the threat that Trump poses to democracy in recent days, and her campaign has worked to highlight the vice president's support from Republicans and comments from former Trump officials about the conduct in stops across the nation. A packed final week this week has included visits to 3 blue wall states with former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney and a CNN town hall in Pennsylvania tonight, followed by a rally in Georgia on Thursday and a rally in Michigan on Saturday, and a trip to Houston, Texas on Sunday. You know, Vice President Kamala Harris and her campaign team and even some of Donald Trump's own allies say that they expect that the former president will quickly declare victory on Election Day, even if the outcome is not settled in key swing states. Between the time it takes to process mail-in ballots and deal with provisional ballots in some battleground states, votes will not be fully tabulated on election night. Projections of who won a close presidential race might not come until days after, very similar to the 2020 election. And so all the more reason why the vice president's campaign is really thinking about their strategy should that happen. And J.D. Vance's willingness to regularly take questions from mainstream news outlets has added an unofficial duty to his role as Donald Trump's running mate. You know what that duty is? I bet you can guess it. Explainer in chief. You see, in interviews at news conferences and while speaking with reporters on the campaign plane, Vance, the Republican senator from Ohio, often finds himself having to defend, decode, or, well, actually, you know, whatever provocative Trump that comment that has made most recently. That's what J.D. Vance is busy doing, having to make it make sense. Well, that being the case, I think his job may get a little harder after some of the news that we have heard today, especially former President Trump's comments seemingly admiring Adolf Hitler. In other news, 2 members of Congress are pressing officials for answers after NBC News exposed failures to notify relatives of dead people whose bodies were used for medical research. Can't make this stuff up. The politicians also asked about compensation for those families. Representatives Jasmine Crockett and Mark Vesey, both Democrats from Texas, made the request today in a letter to medical examiners in Dallas and Tarrant counties, citing an NBC News investigation that found that the counties had provided hundreds of unclaimed bodies to the University of North Texas Health Science Center without obtaining consent from the deceased or their next of kin. The center dissected many of those bodies and leased out those parts for use by other medical schools, for-profit research companies, and the Army. Can you imagine that? I can't imagine that. It's not like one or two bodies. These were a lot of bodies, and this was happening over a period of time, extreme period of time. In other news, Vice President Kamala Harris said in an interview with NBC News' Haley Jackson on Tuesday that she is not concerned that sexism could affect next month's election, and that she thinks the country is ready for a woman of color in the White House. We'll certainly be talking more about that with our expert panel of guests. And as Election Day approaches, campaigns are making last-ditch efforts to court young voters. But those young millennials and older Gen Z voters born in the mid to late 1990s who went to the polls for the first time in 2016 say they're exhausted and disillusioned. They face 3 election cycles where the stakes seem massive. The candidates don't feel fresh, and the Republican nominee has remained the same, they said. And have you all heard about this? I've been talking a lot about this today. I mentioned it earlier today on my show right here on KBLA Talk 1580, A More Perfect Union. And want to get my guest's fresh take on this in a little bit. But red wave redo. Are GOP polls rigging the averages in Trump's favor? Polling by right-leaning firms have exploded this election cycle, and maybe they want to be accurate, or maybe they're just trying to create a sense of momentum for Donald Trump. It's all certainly possible. We'll dig into that in just a bit. And finally, over 230 Republican candidates have cast doubt on the 2024 election. These are Republican candidates. Washington Post reported on this, and this is another story I mentioned earlier, where nearly half of Republican candidates for Congress or top state offices have used social media to cast doubt on the integrity of the 2024 election. According to the Washington Post analysis, a pervasive effort within the GOP to undermine public trust in the vote ahead of November 5th. You see, from November 9th, 2022 to October 11th, at least 236 Republican candidates posted or amplified a range of falsehoods or misinformation about election malfeasance. Many candidates baselessly accused Democrats of trying to sway the election through former President Trump's court cases or by registering non-citizens to vote. Others falsely likened Vice President Harris's nomination to a coup or promoted misinformation about voter fraud. We'll be getting into this story and so much more. When we come forward, I'm really delighted to welcome author Andrew Carl and Jamar Brown, the executive director of Color of Change PAC. You're listening to Areva Martin in Real Time. I'm your guest host, Dr. Nicordelai Corte. More when we come forward.
You're listening to Areva Martin in Real Time on KBLA Talk 1580.
That morning chill means truck season.
5 more minutes.
No snoozing. Do it all in a Chevy Colorado or Silverado, including the class-leading range of the Silverado EV.
Talking to me?
Work, play, hauling, off-roading, a Chevy truck can take it all.
Okay, I'm up.
It's Chevy Truck Season. Get 0% financing on all 2024 Silverado 1500 pickups when you finance with GM Financial. Chevrolet, together, let's drive.
0% APR for 36 months. Monthly payment is $27.78 for every $1,000 you finance. Example down payment 9.3%. Must finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available at least in some other offers. Can you retail delivery by 10/31/24?
Downy Rinse and Refresh. Break up with stinky clothes.
Rinse it out.
Every now and then I get a little bit tired of the stinks that just will never come out.
Oh, Downy the rinse change.
Every now and then I rinse it out. One wash and it delivers. One wash, it smells so clean. Downy Rinse and Refresh, it's a dream.
Downy Rinse and Refresh. Fights odor in just one wash. Guaranteed.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and the Ad Council.
Girl, I have a secret. When I get stressed out, I get sweaty. That's why I use Secret Clinical Antiperspirant. It's like my own secret weapon. For 72 hours, I get Secret's strongest protection against sweat caused by stress, heat, and activity, because you know how crazy life can get. Plus, it's made with advanced odor fighters that don't just cover up smelliness. They help prevent it from happening in the first place. Believe me, if I weren't wearing Secret, I'd be a hot, smelly mess. Thankfully, Secret works.
KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Los Angeles Regional Food Bank is on a mission to fight hunger and provide nutritious food to those in need across our community. They partner with federal, state, and local programs advocating for better policies and funding for critical hunger relief programs like Cal Fresh, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, and the Child and Adult Care Food Program. The food bank works with coalitions and local representatives to make sure hunger is addressed in every district of LA County. They also run nutrition education campaigns, raise hunger awareness, and source nutritious food for distribution, all while supporting regulations that allow food pantries to operate safely. Want to help? Visit lafoodbank.org or call 323-234-3030 to volunteer or find a food bank near you. Together, we can ensure that no one goes hungry in Los Angeles County. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The way we spend our time defines who we are. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time. I'm Dr. Nicolai Corte, your guest host, filling in for Areva Martin today. I'm really delighted to welcome back to the show someone who is no stranger to the show, Jamar Brown. He is the executive director of Color of Change PAC. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Good to see you, my friend. Good to see you, and always good to be here, chatting on all the important topics.
That's right. That's right. We in the right place for that. And then I also want to welcome to the show an author. I am a big fan of all of the authors that we have a chance to talk to as a fellow author. Andrew Carl, he is University of Virginia professor and author of The Black Tax. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. And, so many headlines that are trending today. Speaking of the black tax, in too many parts of the country, it feels like a poll tax for black voters looking to exercise their right to vote. Let's start off with really these what in a typical election cycle would be potentially disqualifying. I'm hearing from a former White House chief of staff in that New York Times interview that Donald Trump meets the definition of fascist, and that this guy has been admiring the work of Adolf Hitler. Andrew, talk to us about why this bombshell is not as disqualifying this election cycle as it might have been in others.
I mean, I don't even know if it's a bombshell at this point. I mean, it's been staring us in the face for, 8 years now. I mean, Donald Trump is who he says he is. And, it's pretty clear that, when given the opportunity, he's going to govern like a fascist authoritarian. And, I think that sounding that alarm as many as times and bringing along as many, people who are inside that administration who saw it firsthand, like John Kelly, I think is an important aspect of it. But I think it's not enough to just continue to point out that, Donald Trump is a fascist and he poses a fascist threat, because Kamala Harris really needs to stress an economic vision that can counter that, because history has shown that, oftentimes countries slide into fascism when democracy stops working for them, when it doesn't work on their pocketbooks and it doesn't work in their daily lives. And, he plays on that. I mean, he's really stoking cynicism and a kind of demoralized electorate. And that's really, just as he's trying to suppress the vote, trying to scare people away from the polls, he's also trying to demoralize the public into just kind of, accepting their fate, being like, his rule. And so I think, she needs to project hope. She needs to project a vision. And these last days are really going to be critical to that.
And Jamar, I want to bring you into this conversation. What are you hearing, particularly from the Black voters, the older Black voters, younger Black voters, that Color of Change PAC has been engaging? What can you tell us about the messages that are breaking through about Donald Trump, as a fascist, as a threat to democracy? Does any of this even matter to the voter universe that you all are working to engage?
Well, absolutely, it matters. It matters about our democracy. It matters about morality in our politics. It matters about how we combat misinformation and disinformation, which is a lot of the conversation that's centered around, is that people really sometimes don't have the correct facts right in front of them, based on misinformation and disinformation that's been targeted at our communities. But look, who sits as president of the United States, the morality of that person actually matters. And Kamala Harris is showing us that morality and character all matter, right? You don't have to tear people down, and you can lift people up too. And morality matters in terms of how people receive and access services and opportunities to better their own lives and in their own communities, right? Black voters also care about all the economic issues. Black voters care about student loan reform. They care about starting small businesses. We care about maintaining our businesses. We care about expanding the child tax credit, right? We care about technology. We care about all of those things. But what Kamala Harris is also showing us is that the values of the person also should matter too, because that will also later be connected to policy. And I think that's important to recognize in this election.
And speaking of character and integrity, Andrew, VP Harris, her campaign team, and some of Donald Trump's own allies say that they expect the former president to quickly declare victory on election night if the outcome is not yet settled in key swing states. Talk to us about the danger in this and how seriously you believe that the Harris team and Democrats should be taking this potential maneuver by former President Trump.
Oh, I'm sure he's going to do that. I mean, he did it last election cycle. And I think, if they have smart people in the room, which I'm sure they do, they have been preparing for that scenario from day one. And I think, we need to be very vigilant on election day, not just in ensuring that people, are able to exercise their right to vote, but ensuring that the votes are counted. And I mean, this is going to be, the days after the election are going to be very, very, very critical in terms of ensuring that the people's will is heard. And so I think these are very real threats. And I mean, I think there's a lot to say about the idea that he's really trying to kind of prime the sort of his voters to engage in the kind of insurrection that he failed last time around. I mean, there's plenty of evidence on the ground that it's not just intimidation leading up to the election, but really sort of getting his most rabid supporters into a mindset that this election is theirs. It's and if the outcome doesn't go to their liking, then they're going to take action. So I think we all need to be prepared for that.
Jamar, so already, we've just got the conversation started, and some of the biggest headlines that are trending today are around the former president being called a fascist, not just by his former chief of staff, but by the sitting vice president of the United States, his opponent in this race for president. We also have talked about Trump declaring victory early, and using this as a tactic to sow chaos and to project strength, whether he is declared the winner or not. Talk to us about why you believe this race is still so close. When you have a candidate that is sharing their admiration for Adolf Hitler and is willing to engage in tactics that sow chaos and, quite frankly, are laying the groundwork for a lack of a smooth transition to power, if in fact that is the case.
I think there are a number of factors as to why this race is important. People are still finally getting to know Vice President Harris as a presidential nominee. They're still assessing her plans. They're still battling through misinformation and disinformation about who she is and who her record is. But look, you have someone like Donald Trump, who this is his third time running for president. He has stoked his political career on fanning flames of racism, fascism, and all the isms, right? We can go down the line. He stoked his career on that. And what is real is, even when we elected Barack Obama, everybody thought racism was over. And then Donald Trump comes in 2016 and reminds you there's still folks that think a certain way. And he's playing into that and then connecting that to power. And some people not understanding the full scope and power of the office of President of the United States and how that can be misused by the wrong person who gets elected. So I think that is one of the reasons why this race is close. And then lastly, I think at the end of the day, just as the professor was saying, right, they're being told that this is something's being stolen from them, right? We see almost like modern day civil war. And the thing that you're going to have to watch in this election that's going to be important is not waiting until January 6th when the Congress meets. It's going to be about what happens on election day, what happens in polling locations, what happens in the locations where the votes are being counted, in particularly Black-led cities around the country, when the Electoral College electors meet in their respective state capitals in December to certify the results. Right? He's laying out the fact that they're being cheated, and when people feel that they're being cheated or that they're being overlooked or that they're being overruled, what do? Rebel. And he fans that flame. And there are folks that still think that the Republican Party should be in power when really the Republican Party is in crisis and they don't even realize it yet.
Yeah. I mean, they sure are in a crisis, but they're in a crisis of their own making. Andrew, and I can't help but think about Lieutenant Governor Robinson in North Carolina, a Trump-endorsed candidate who has referred to himself as a Black Nazi, reportedly. And it's strange to me that the charges of anti-Semitism don't seem to stick. They don't seem to stick on former President Trump. They don't seem to stick on folks like Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor and the gubernatorial nominee by the Republicans in North Carolina, must win North Carolina. Doesn't seem to be sticking with him. Talk to us about how and why Trump and his allies seem to be evading accountability when it comes to their anti-Semitic rhetoric.
Yeah, it is really sort of disturbing. And I think one thing that I come back around to is that we have been, like over the last 8 years, the political rhetoric has just gotten ratcheted up to such a degree. And again, rightfully so, because of, the threat that Trump has posed and the damage that he has inflicted. But to a certain point, I do wonder if certain segments of the American public have just tuned this out. And in a sense, like these words don't resonate in the way that they perhaps should. And I think, that's the sort of danger we have at this moment is that, it's like the boy that cried wolf. Well, the moral of that, that story ends when there is actually a wolf, coming into town. And I think we need to sort of find ways to make that connection here that, yes, his first 4 years were pretty bad. They could have been much worse. And if he gets back into office, it's going to be an absolute catastrophe. And so I think that they're trying to continue to sort of make this clear. I'm not really sure why these candidates are not summarily rejected, by their own rhetoric alone. But I think we've gotten to a point where the rhetoric has just gotten sort of thrown around so much that certain voters, really kind of think that we're all just playing a game here, and that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and I actually think a big part of this has to do with the media environment that we find ourselves in. It is a decentralized media environment. People aren't just turning on the evening news as they did when we were much younger, and some of us had a whole lot less gray. But people are going to a lot of sources for news, including social media. Where what you see isn't always what you should believe. When we come forward, I'm going to talk to Jamar Brown of Color of Change PAC and Andrew Carl of the University of Virginia to talk about the power of mis and disinformation. More importantly, what we can do about it. What we can do about it when we repost or retweet or reshare. I'm going to give them an opportunity to enlighten us when it comes to our own media literacy, as we are only weeks away from one of the biggest elections of our lifetime. If you haven't already, go to iwillvote.com and get all the information you need to make a plan, to cast your ballot, to make your voice heard. While you're at it, go to votingwhileblack.com to tap into some of the work that Color of Change PAC is leading. More with my extraordinary guest. This is Areva Martin in real time. I'm your guest host, Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and you are listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
Time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Testimony is underway in what is sure to be a closely watched trial in Kentucky. Former Louisville police officer Brett Hankinson is being retried in connection with the botched raid on Breonna Taylor's apartment in 2020. Detroit Lions wide receiver Jamison Williams is facing another suspension. ESPN reports Williams is set to be suspended 2 games for violating the NFL's performance-enhancing substances policy. Black patients are less likely than white patients to get a certain combination of medication to reduce pain after surgery. That's according to a study presented Sunday at the American Society of Anesthesiologists annual meeting in Philadelphia, which found Black patients are more likely to be prescribed opioids for pain. And 50 Cent is giving thousands of dollars to the Houston Children's Charity in Texas. In an Instagram post, the rapper revealed he raised $500,000 for the organization. Overall, the gala raised over $6 million, which is a new record. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Enjoy the rest of your night. Get home safe. In West Covina's 10 East before Via Verde, watch for a stall blocking the right lane, and traffic is starting to get busy and heavy from Holt Avenue. Back in Torrance, a 45-minute traffic jam from Santa Monica Boulevard is ahead on the 405 South before Western Avenue as a stall blocks the left lane. Accidents been cleared from Baldwin Park's 10 West before Baldwin Park Boulevard. Traffic in Hollywood also continues to run heavy over 20 minutes on the 101 South between Gower Street and Mission Road. And in Orange, on the 55 North Icatella Avenue, watch for an accident on the right shoulder with heavy traffic flow in the area.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. At Blindster, we offer custom-made faux wood and real wood blinds and shutters, cellular shades, Roman shades, bamboo shades, exterior shades, and more, all at factory direct prices. Don't pay too much for new blinds. Go to Blindster.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
It's a milestone moment tonight for the Clippers franchise and Clippers Nation. The Clippers will play the Phoenix Suns in their regular season opener in their new home, the Intuit Dome in Inglewood. Capacity 18,000. The price tag for Clippers owner Steve Ballmer, $2 billion. For the first time in 25 years, the Clippers will not have to share a home with the Lakers. The only issue for the Clippers is a lack of star power tonight. Paul George has moved on to Philadelphia. Kawhi Leonard's sore right knee will sideline him for at least the first week of the season, could be much longer. 10-time All-Star James Harden will be in the lineup, but he's 36. It still should be a fun atmosphere tonight in the Intuit Dome. 7 p.m. tip-off on ESPN. The Dodgers are making plans to honor Fernando Valenzuela before Game 1 Friday against the Yankees in the World Series. The legendary pitcher died Tuesday night at age 63. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcasts of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black.
Keep following the leader.
Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Hello, LA. Metro is your partner for thriving communities and sustainable travel. We're dedicated to providing better transit for everyone. When you go Metro, you're more connected to jobs, healthcare, school, and loved ones. It's the way of the future. Start your journey at metro.net.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. The Live Your Life organization mentors young women, helping them break negative mindsets and see beyond their surroundings. Through career exposure and hands-on training, they're encouraged to think big, stay focused, and make positive choices. Founded by Nikisha Mama Boo Smith, who transformed her life to become a community leader. Live Your Life is changing lives, but they need your help. They're raising funds to keep their new building open and expand their program. Your donations will support food, clothes, hygiene products, and holiday giveaways. Visit liveyourlife32.com. That's LIVEYOLIFE32.com to help today. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Oh, man. Looks like Bobby needs a ride to the airport again.
Grab the keys.
Who's taking Auntie and her friends to the swap meet?
Grab the keys.
How about we drop these boxes off at Miss Johnson?
Grab the keys.
Whether you're giving rides or hauling gear, you're all about getting things done. So do it all in a Chevy SUV. From the versatile Equinox and sporty Blazer to the roomy Traverse, our lineup of SUVs will carry you through every adventure. All you have to do is
grab the keys.
That's how we do. Head to your local Chevy dealer, where well-qualified buyers get 1.9% APR on all 2024 Silverado 1500, Blazer EV, Equinox, Trailblazer, and Colorado models. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive.
1.9% APR for 36 months. Monthly payment is $28.60 for every $1,000 you finance. Example down payment, 17.0%. Must finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available with lease and some other offers. Take new retail delivery by 7/31/24.
Asthma Peak Week is almost here, September 15th through 21st, and it's time to pay attention. Peak Week is a critical time of the year for asthma flare-ups and can lead to hospitalization. Did you know that Black Americans are approximately 5 times more likely than white Americans to be hospitalized for asthma? Stay aware, have a plan, and spread the word on Asthma Peak Week. For more active asthma care tips, visit luma-edu.com. This message is brought to you by Amgen and AstraZeneca.
There's no time like the present. Let's get back to more of Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, your guest host. You can typically find me weekdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on KBLA Talk 1580, where I host a more perfect union. From the White House to your house, we got you covered with expert analysis and compelling interviews from leaders on the front lines. I am delighted to be in conversation right now today with Andrew Carl. He is a professor over at the University of Virginia. He's also an author of The Black Tax. We're going to be talking about that a whole lot more a little bit later. But for now, I also want to welcome Jamar Brown. He is the executive director of Color of Change PAC. And what we're doing is unpacking today's biggest headlines. And one of which has to do with 2 members of Congress who are pressing officials for answers after NBC News exposed failures to notify relatives of dead people whose bodies were used for medical research. The politicians also asked about compensation for those families. I'm talking about folks like Representatives Jasmine Crockett and Mark Vesey, both Democrats from Texas who made that request on Wednesday. And I've got to ask you, Jamar, as the former executive director of the Democratic Party of Texas, why now? With 2 weeks away until the biggest election of our lifetime, why are folks like Representative Jasmine Crockett and Mark Vesey really drawing attention to this issue that's impacting families in Texas?
Well, I think one of the critical things that's important about this election is people are also tuned in around the issues, right? And so for Representative Crockett and also Representative Vesey, I think that's super important for them to leverage this platform of the election that we're currently in right now. And so for them, that's what they're doing. And also Representative Crockett has a unique brand. She has a brand, she has a platform she's been able to leverage, and she's been able to use those platforms in a meaningful way to really try to engage, especially young Black voters, around some critical issues. And so I think that's why you see that may potentially happening before the election. And in Texas, it's really easy to get attention during the election season, unfortunately or fortunately, on some of the issues also as well.
Andrew, do you think this is also highlighting the contrast between elected officials that use their positions to seek accountability for people who may otherwise not get it?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly, and speaking to Black voters, this is tapping into a long, dark history of both medical experimentation and disrespect and in this sort of just callous disregard for Black lives that I think is, this is being putting a spotlight on, which again in Texas, which is being, has a very hotly contested Senate race, and these representatives are running for re-election. I mean, I'm sure there's a bit of calculation there in sort of reminding voters both what the stakes are and sort of, putting a sort of finer point on the humanity that is often being disregarded and disrespected by the right in America, and what kind of future might hold in a Trump America. I mean, again, I'm not sure beyond just the fact that this information needs to get out, and this is again, as mentioned, an opportune time to get the public's attention drawn to this. I think this also does speak directly to some of the concerns of Black voters in Texas and elsewhere as well.
And Jamar, speaking of Texas, Kamala Harris is to rally with Colin Allred in Houston just days before Election Day. The Texas Tribune reporting that VP Harris is headed to Houston on Friday with U.S. Representative Colin Allred, the Dallas Democrat challenging Republican U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. A rally, the surprise visit, Harris's first trip to Texas since she officially clinched the Democratic presidential nomination more than 2 months ago, comes in the closing weeks of a campaign that has seen VP Harris largely focus her efforts on other states seen as more competitive. Why Texas and why now?
Well, there are a couple of things that are important, right? You have to expand the map in a couple of ways, particularly on the Senate, right? As you mentioned, I was the former executive director of the Texas Democratic Party. We have seen over the last few cycles that Texas has gotten bluer and bluer, right? The state has gotten way more diverse. It had the highest population growth in terms of diversity of Black and brown people during the last census. The margins are narrowing every election, right? Where Beto O'Rourke lost by 210,000, roughly about 3 points during the last Senate race. And in 6 years, right, there's a lot of opportunity. So that's number one. Number two, I think it's a smart move on Vice President's part because it's not just getting her elected to the White House. It's also about having Congress so that she can legislate, right? So that all these proposals that she's talking about, right? The tax credits to small businesses, the expanding the earned child tax credit, right? Immigration and border security, all the things that she's talked about or even that people have attacked her on. It's important for her to also have a Senate. And so the Senate map is probably shifting. And so it's really important for her as the presidential candidate to be invested in who wins in that Senate race. The third thing that's important is that we all know that Ted Cruz is very vulnerable in this election. He is vulnerable. The polls have been 1 to 2 points for probably a month or two now. And they just had a hotly contested debate on last week. And so I think if you're going to have to go pick up another seat to maintain the Democratic Senate for Kamala Harris to govern, should she be elected to the White House, Texas is the place to go.
Yeah, and Texas is not the place to be for an abortion. Texas's abortion ban does contain an exception to save the life of the mother, though critics say that the law's language is unclear and has led women, some of whom Colin Allred has featured in his ads, leaving the state to access life-saving care. Senator Cruz, meanwhile, has repeatedly declined to say whether he stands on where he stands on the question of rape and incest exceptions, arguing that the matter should be settled at the state level. And so certainly we see in the state of Texas the issue of abortion and their current abortion ban really animating voters. We know that this is an issue that VP Harris has leaned into in a really strong way on her presidential campaign. But Andrew, the question is, is this within reach? Is it possible this election cycle for Democrats to potentially hold on to the U.S. Senate with a win potentially in the state of Texas? We haven't seen something like this. We've seen a Democrat win statewide in Texas in a long time. What if you were a betting man? What are the odds that Democrats election day victories may include a Senate seat in Texas?
Well, unfortunately, I think the odds are better than John Tester's at this point, and that's what it really comes down to. Is that John Tester is holding on to that seat in Montana, and it seems to be the odds are pretty stacked against him. And so I think this is a calculation on the part of the Democratic Party and the Harris campaign to try to flip this seat to make up for that loss. Now, I'll also say, this really speaks to the message that I'd like to hear more of from the Harris campaign is, how important it is to elect Democrats to actually address the pocketbook issues that I think are really, driving the electorate on this, to actually make the connection, not just between the fact that women are dying in this country because of the Republican Party and Donald Trump putting 3 Supreme Court justices, and that clearly is resonating with women voters right now. But a lot of the sort of economic pain that many Americans are feeling is a direct result of Republican obstructionism during the Biden administration. He barely got, a few key pieces of legislation through, and they were very watered down. Many of the sort of things that concern voters, I think that the Democratic Party and the Harris campaign can make that connection between those problems and Republican obstructionism and make the case that you don't just need to elect me, we need to have a majority in the House and Senate. And as well, if we ever want to claw back some of these Supreme Court seats, you definitely need a Senate majority because Republicans won't let anyone through. So this again is really critical. And this is, again, I think, Texas has definitely been trending blue for a while. It's getting closer and closer. And I think this, is a realistic pickup if we really put in the sort of ground game that is needed.
I want to pick up on this thread in terms of what's possible with a Democratic Senate majority. There's an issue that we're probably not talking enough about, the fact that the Trump tax cut from 2017 expires in 2025. And so the ability for Democrats to fund so many of the proposals that VP Harris and Governor Walz have laid out, the road to that is going to be through tax reform. And I know I got the right ones to talk about that, especially Andrew Carl, who is the author of The Black Tax, which is a revealing history that's deep, it's broad, and infuriating. The Black Tax, it casts a bold light on the racist practices long hidden in the shadows of America's tax regimes. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we come forward. You're listening to and streaming Areva Martin in Real Time. I'm your guest host, Dr. Nicordelai Corte. More with our guest when we come forward.
Real Time, KBLA Talk 1580.
Have you heard of the 50-30-20 rule? This can help you spend and save your money wisely. So how does it work? Distribute your dollars into 3 buckets: 50% towards needs, 30% towards your wants, and 20% goes to savings. Use this tool to help your journey to financial success. Sponsored by JP Morgan Chase & Company.
Which superhero movie is this?
This is my favorite part, when they all come together in the name of justice.
You know, you could do that too.
Oh yeah? How?
What you just described is what happens when Black folks vote.
Mm-hmm.
When we come together and vote using our power, we win and get leaders who will protect our rights, lower housing costs.
All right, let's go together.
Yeah?
I mean, we gotta unite in the name of justice.
And vote like our lives depend on it.
Paid for by NAACP.
From the first day of kindergarten through the day they graduate high school, in California, 38% of students attend a public school that fails to meet minimum health standards. That's why we need Prop 2. Voting yes on Prop 2 will fund urgent repairs at local schools, protect kids from toxic mold, asbestos, and lead, ensure clean drinking water, and repair leaky ceilings and storm damage. Yes on Prop 2. To fix what's actually broken. All funds go to local schools without raising taxes. You heard that right. So join the California NAACP nurses and teachers and vote yes on 2, because all our kids deserve a safe place to learn. Ad paid for by Yes on Prop 2, sponsored by Nonprofit Education, Labor, and Business Associations. Ad committee's top funders: California Building Industry Association, California Teachers Association, Coalition for Adequate School Housing.
We're not just a thermometer recording and broadcasting popular opinion. We aim to be a thermostat, transforming the conversation about climate justice in our community. This is KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way Black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, though.
The way we spend our time defines who we are. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA.
And you are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and I'm really delighted to be in conversation with Jamar Brown. He's the Executive Director of Color of Change PAC, and Andrew Carl, who is a professor over at the University of Virginia. He's also the author of The Black Tax. And I think the one issue that we're not talking nearly enough about is the tax plan for the next president. We know that the Trump tax cuts expired. 2017 Trump tax cuts, they expire in 2025. And so that is really the path for Democrats to be able to fund a lot of the proposals that they have put out. Of course, that requires maintaining a Senate majority. It also matters having a House Democratic majority as well. But, you know, Andrew, you are an expert in this. You've written a book about this. Talk to us about why folks should be thinking about tax reform as they consider casting their ballot for the next president of the United States.
Well, I mean, this is actually the thing that the Republican Party cares about the most. And that's ultimately what they're about, is tax cuts for the rich. And I think one thing that is most important to sort of recognize, what my book sort of gets into, is that tax cuts for the rich is not just sort of taking money out of the public treasury, but it is also shifting the burden onto the poor and the disadvantaged and compounding inequality in America. And, all of the sort of challenges we face today on a warming planet with rising inequality, very deep and, long-standing social needs that need to be met are only going to be met with raising taxes on the people who have the most wealth in this country. I mean, wealth has never been more concentrated in America than it is today. And so much of that wealth is effectively shielded from taxation. I think this is an issue that Democrats should not run from, but should actually lean into the fact that, these we have bankrupted this country, and we have allowed for the wealthy to just run away with their money and leave everyone else behind. And the only way to actually begin to rebuild our society, to address the sort of numerous issues that we need, from crumbling infrastructure to a jobs plan for this country for working Americans, all these things are going to require public investment, and that public investment has to come from somewhere. And right now, we not only have a tax code that is, really, taking far less from those at the top than it should, but is also one that is imposing really heavy burdens on those at the bottom of the income scale. And I think that is something that those two messages need to be joined together, and a real sort of strong argument in favor of public investment, which again should not be coming from those at the bottom, but instead those at the top.
Jamar, talk to us about what you're hearing, particularly with the young Black voters and even older Black voters that you all are engaging through your Voting While Black initiative. Again, I want to encourage people to go to votingwhileblack.com to tap into some of the work that you're doing there. But, on an issue like tax reform, an issue that really impacts all of us. We fall into one tax bracket or another, and tax collection, means the difference between, a lot of the proposals that we may support from our respective candidates. Talk to me about how this issue shows up with some of the Black voters you're talking to, if at all.
Well, one of the things that's important to share with you all is through our C4, so compliance, of course, through Color of Change. We actually led a campaign this year to ensure that states actually provide a direct service file for across the country, right? And we worked in dozens of states to make sure that that is accessible to Black voters, but also to obviously folks that are preparing taxes. So this is work we're doing at Color of Change to talk exactly about what we're here talking about right now, is reforming the tax code, making the tax code equitable in a meaningful way, because what we're talking about in this election is Black voters who feel like they're feeling the squeeze, they're feeling the crunch, they're feeling the burden of bigger, larger economic decisions being made without some of them, right? And if that feeling exists, what Kamala Harris is talking about is we have to shift wealth distribution, reduce income inequality right around the country. And this is why we're talking about removing tax cuts that only benefit the wealthy, right? And making sure that we do that. And so we've been doing that work, right, through our policy work all year long. And we're going to continue doing that work, obviously, as tax season is starting right after the election, and making sure. And so we're going to be there doing that. The other piece that's important, just as you said, Doc, is this with where the resources come. But the other piece that Kamala Harris will have to contend with is also not just finding the revenue and moving the revenue toward the plans that she's presented. It's also a budget fight, right? And where do tax cuts show up in the budget fight, right? Both in terms of revenue, but also in terms of program services for folks. And so those are the things that we're talking about. And those are the things that are super, super, super important when you talk about taxes. We have an opportunity to decrease income inequality, but we also have a real opportunity to talk about not just building wealth, but redistributing wealth in the country. And that is what Black voters want to hear, right? It's not, don't just give me a tax cut so I can make it. Let's talk about the services and programs that I can actually thrive and innovate and be able to come out on the other end and be able to take care of my family and support my community.
In our remaining minutes, I want to give each of you a chance to give your 60-second hot take on any predictions you have for Election Day. I'm not just talking about the outcome of the election, but I'm talking about the safety and security of our fellow Americans on Election Day. We know that the Washington Post has done an analysis of over 230 Republican candidates who have cast doubt on the 2024 election. At the top of our conversation today, I mentioned that the former president has plans to declare victory early on election night, win, lose, or draw. Andrew, I want to start with you. Any predictions on the safety and security of our fellow Americans on election day?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually I grew up in a deeply red county in Ohio, and I still have family there who work the polls on election day. I was actually speaking to my mother last night, and I mean, she's deeply concerned about the kind of all the lies that are being spread, all the sort of distrust that is being circulating amongst Trump's most rabid supporters. And I think, again, we're going to see a lot of this around the country, and I think we really need to be prepared for it. I think, the other thing, again, though, is that, and I think, one thing you alluded to at the outset here is, how, there's a lot of evidence that they're trying to game the polls. They're trying to sort of create this impression that Trump is leading, similar to, again, what happened in 2022. We could expect to see a situation where Democrats overperform the polls, and I'm one who hopes that is the case. But I mean, again, if you combine like polls that maybe show Trump very close or even ahead, and then the vote comes in with Harris ahead, then that is going to be the trigger for the kind of violent at times and actions that we could expect to see. And I think, in a lot of respects, this is the calm before the storm. And I think, we need to sort of be prepared for, after the election and for the months after that, because there's going to be, we're going to need to sort of remain vigilant in ensuring that votes are counted and ensuring that the public's, the sort of popular will is heard.
Jamar, your hot take in about 30 seconds?
I can do it in 30 seconds. We need to be prepared, but not surprised. Donald Trump has been doing this over the last 8 years. This is not new. And they want to destroy the systems and destroy our trust in the systems in order for them to gain power. And so we can't let them do that. And particularly, I want to really draw attention to places like Detroit, Philadelphia, Atlanta, and our rural communities really need the help and support. So if you can help and support. And also, lastly, I'll just say, I want to thank folks who are working the polls, because they are helping our society and our democracy, but potentially putting themselves in harm's way because of the things that Donald Trump and his allies, if not just him, and many of the Republican candidates on down ballot are also doing the same thing. And so we just got to be prepared, but not surprised.
Our thanks to Jamar Brown, the executive director of Color of Change PAC. Be sure to go to votingwhileblack.com to tap into some of the work that they're doing there, and to Andrew Carl over at the University of Virginia, also the author of The Black Tax. I know exactly what I'm adding to my bookshelf. Thank you, gentlemen. Please come back again soon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. You are listening to and streaming Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm your guest host, Dr. Nicordelai Corte. More in our second hour when we come forward.
More things you should know from BIN News. Testimony is underway in what is sure to be a closely watched trial in Kentucky. Former Louisville police officer Brett Hankinson is being retried in connection with a botched raid on Breonna Taylor's apartment in 2020.